Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome back to the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Peter Houston, and this season we're bringing you the best sessions from the Definitive AI Forum for Media, Information and Events, which we held with Flashes and Flames in London at the end of last year. Each episode this season will be accompanied by a write-up of the key takeaways which you can find on our site voices.media or get delivered straight to your inbox every Tuesday by subscribing to the Publisher newsletter, which is also linked from voices.media. This week we're featuring a panel discussion on AI and the future of trusted media, how to balance the efficiencies offered by AI with much needed editorial integrity. Moderated by Duncan of Seedelta, the panel featured Piers, CEO at Reach, Henry Faure Walker, CEO at Newsquest, Emily Shelley, CEO at PA Media Group, and Joanna Levesque, Managing Director at FT Strategies. They discussed how the tension between efficiency and trust is not a zero-sum game, talking about opportunities to do more things quicker with AI, from new product development to journalistic research and content distribution. Also, how to mitigate potential risks to publisher trust by always placing accuracy ahead of speed and firmly fixing the human in the loop. Chris began the session by introducing the panel and asking them how they approach the question of AI in their newsrooms.
So, we're going to talk about some questions around efficiency and integrity with some of Britain's most prolific publishers. I think we have here Emily from PA Media, whose journalists will be all over the country today. One of the great kind of engines of the newsroom, producing stories that then go into all of the publishers across Britain and the globe. People like Henry, who then turn that into 250 plus local news and magazine kind of publishing sites. Goes over to Piers, who does not just that, but also national news, some of the most iconic national news brands, and also a few magazines and probably some things I've forgotten to mention. And then Joe, who sits and judges them all in newsrooms across the world from FT Strategies, who's looking at how publishers should be thinking about the challenges and things that AI brings us. We're going to focus on this panel specifically on a question that we were asked, which is about the importance of being trusted in media and the balance of efficiency and editorial integrity. So before we get kind of deeply into that, I think we should probably just hear from everybody in turn. We'll probably start with you actually, Emily, because you're sort of on the streets. You're sort of the originator. Let's have a little think about, firstly, how many people are we talking about? And secondly, what's your sort of view at the moment of how you're approaching the question of AI in the newsroom?
So between 300 and 400, apologies, I don't know the exact number. And I suppose if you want to talk about a balance between efficiency and editorial integrity, for us there is no balance. We come down heavily on the side of editorial integrity. And some of the stuff we're doing, because we're at the start of the chain, if you like, and we're originating reporting, we don't think AI is actually particularly useful. So AI can't doorstep politicians, it can't sit through court cases, it can't listen to boring council meetings yet, all those sorts of things. And we don't really run a number of too many language things, actually, because we don't have to carefully craft things which are going to engage an audience or sustain them. We have to get the facts out quickly. So on that basis, we've looked at a number of tools and run a number of experiments. They're just not accurate enough for us at the moment. But we have a very different role from publishers.
So let's pass that over to you then, Henry. So next sort of in the chain.
Yeah, I mean, a brief summary of how we're using AI, I think, is probably a good starting point. We have about 800 local journalists. We just do local. We've lent in quite aggressively towards AI. Our newsrooms have some quite powerful AI tools. The most powerful and the most used is effectively a copy drafting tool. And that enables us, and you have to think about this in the context of local journalism and our desire to cover everything that's going on in the community. That enables our journalists who are trained in this tool to take trusted information, that might be press releases they trust, that might be notices from the local council, that might be submitted copy, and put it into effectively a dashboard that then very quickly drafts an article according to their prompts. And that's a very, very effective way for our hard-pressed newsrooms, and they have become quite hard-pressed and struggled to cover all the community in recent years, to actually cover the community probably the best that we've been covering it for the last 10 years. So that's briefly how we approach it.
Fantastic. Piers that's similar but at slightly bigger scale?
Yeah, I mean, similar, I guess, but it's almost a chain from Emily's point about integrity through to Henry's point about efficiencies and making sure our newsrooms are tooled and able to cover, to that point Sean made about infinite content, there's infinite information. How do we curate it? How do we manage it? And then obviously, how do we translate it out in a way that is trusted to our consumers? And that is the big, AI has huge, we've talked some risks, but it has some huge opportunities as well. So you do have to find that balance between the two. We clearly have to drive efficiencies. As we go into non-text world, into video, again, that, if we're a challenger in that space, we need to have, subtitling, editing, all of these heavy processes, and that can be done by AI. But to Emily's point, we talked before about the luxury question. I don't know if luxury is the right word, but we have to look after what defines that information as real, and that is a tightrope to walk. If that's not.
Oh, it's official. You can say in your next quarterly report you're a luxury publisher.
Yeah, I wish. You could charge luxury prices.
Yeah. Joe, is there, I guess, two questions for you. You sort of look across many, many different newsrooms. So, A, is there anything out of this, most of this is pretty common sort of stuff that people are looking at, but is it different in the UK versus the rest of the globe, or are you seeing the same thing pretty much everywhere in the world?
Well, I think there are some trends that are common. We've now worked, actually as of last week, we've worked with, just hit the milestone of working with 1,000 publishers worldwide. And of those, about 100 have been on AI-related initiatives. So I think we do therefore, have credibility to talk about some global trends. And I think that we do see some things across the world which are common. It's clear that there's an opportunity to make the retrieval of some standardized information much quicker. So if you looked at, for instance, Hurriyet, who are a Turkish publisher, who've been able to template a level of earthquake reporting, for example. The information is pretty standard that you need, the magnitude, the time, the location, and actually the source is clear to verify. So that there's some clear automation opportunities. There's also some fantastic opportunities to do more with the same. So thinking about English language publications, for example, there's lots and lots of evidence now from Southeast Asia, from Europe, around English language translation, which really provides more opportunities to reach an interested audience. I think the common link that we see across the world is the human in the loop. So the thing that we see across all of our initiatives is the opportunity to automate, the opportunity to scale, the opportunity to try new formats with more engagement, like podcasts and translations and that sort of thing. But the human in the loop and the transparency of where you've used AI, I think, is the commonality.
Right, we should just cover that last quickly. Everybody. So we'll ask everybody. I think we talked about this before. None of us here are allowing kind of AI to write straight to the page. Please just confirm that for the audience. No, so this is...
Don't use AI to write anything.
No. So this is always at the moment sort of mostly in the kind of internal production process, somewhere between journalistic discovery and distribution in that middle part.
I think there's a really good point there, though, which is I don't think we're ever in danger of being the bad actors here. So we're all obsessed with editorial integrity. We're all IPSO regulated. We all abide by the editor's code. We're all putting humans in the loop. I don't think anybody at any AI platform is sitting on a panel or waking up late at night, worrying about mistakes that their AI might have made. So in a way, we're sort of the rearguard action against all of this.
I like to think of holding ourselves to a higher standard. But your point, I think you made the point very well. One of the things that you're interested in is speed of getting stories out there. And in a world in which disinformation spreads faster than ever, that speed is very important. I think, could you talk a little bit about that, just about how stories break now?
Yes. So, I mean, for us, it's the kind of the three things of being fast, fair, and accurate. And you can't be fast without being fair, and you can't be fast or fair without being accurate. So it has to be all three. So we won't go fast at the expense of accuracy. I think sometimes it just takes longer to stand something up, but we still think it's important to do it. People still do say it's on PA to mean that it's been verified, and that's takes 150 years to win that level of trust, and you can lose it in a heartbeat. So for us, speed sort of isn't everything. However, I do think that some of our institutions have a kind of role to play in making sure that they are releasing information quickly, they are allowing media access, they are speaking to the media, because I think it's not doing that which is, in a way, allows misinformation, disinformation to fill a void, because, nature abhors a vacuum. So I think there is something there, but I don't think it's on the media side for not wanting the access. I think it's on some of our institutions, our politicians, etc., thinking, oh, brilliant, I don't have to deal with the media anymore.
But I think the
that
point
allows that vacuum to...
The point you make is very well made, which is that we can all invest in trust, but we work in a macro environment which might not be investing for the same ends. So we hope that those two things over time will balance. Publishers, in my mind, have been sort of searching after efficiency since, at the times it was like 1827 when the steam press was invented, and it was 7 times faster, and everybody thought, brilliant, we can, this is a great leap forward. So I sort of reject the premise in the question that there is this zero-sum trade-off between efficiency and integrity. I think you'll search for efficiency in order to reinvest in other things that you want to do. And Piers, I don't know whether you can talk about how you sort of balance those two off, because you're under much more scrutiny in terms of being a PLC for that exact question.
Yeah. I mean, we, as you say, we're a PLC. We have some deep requirements on our business, which means we need to make sure the business works. And I think it is incumbent. I feel like we're sometimes at the bleeding edge of making sure that there is a profitable, sustainable, professional, and accountable, to Emily's point, media content generation business. And that pressure to make sure, it's something that I guess I have to balance with the editorial teams every day, is the requirement for them to do more and push the envelope on efficiency and speed, but making sure that we don't lose the very point of our being, because we will not, if everything is make-believe and every image is created, to some extent, the Liverpool Echo, the Mirror, they lose its raison d'etre, and finding that balance is super tough. And to Emily's point, I think we need to make sure that the institutions that we work with understand the value of those businesses and the importance of holding that line. But it's tough, I won't lie. I don't think there's any media organisation right now that isn't under sustained pressure, and the tech platforms don't need to worry about some of the things that we worry about. If there is a car crash on the A3 and one says 3 cars, one says 4 cars, what's the AI overview going to say? And how do they make that value judgment between going through the 3 cars versus the 4 cars? Now, that may seem a very small point, but it's fundamental to everything we do. But yeah, of course, I need my teams to be producing to their maximum capacity to give us a fighting chance to make sure that we're in the spaces. And Sean's right to some extent. There's no point complaining about platforms. It's to some extent it's complaining about the weather. We need to make sure that what we're doing is served up and accessible to those consumers. But it is tough.
It's a room full of Brits. We're allowed to complain about the weather. Don't come at us. Henry, I guess one of the signposts of people that this is, we are sort of taking the harvest of that efficiency and reinvesting is that we're able to do new things. I think you had some good examples of where you've been able to do things that weren't possible, maybe without these tools.
Yeah, I mean, just building on Piers' point and the general theme, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, integrity and trust in the news brand is critical. And obviously, that's why we will focus on having a human in the loop in these AI tools. But it's a slightly flawed question that we were discussing, because if we're not efficient in our newsrooms and if we don't lean into AI, then we're not going to cover our community properly, and then we're going to lose integrity that way. So you obviously got to have the trust and human loop in the brand, but you've also got to really lean into these AI tools to make sure that you do cover the community properly and give them the news. I mean, what it's enabled to your question, sorry, and what it's enabled us to do is free up the rest of the newsroom. I think this is pretty obvious, to do more higher impact journalism, whether that's getting out and about and doing face-to-face interviews, whether that's getting a little bit more time to do some investigations that they just wouldn't have had time for in the last 5 years. So that's sort of the ethos, where you've got a very efficient AI-trained journalist using the copy creator tool in each of our newsrooms, and they're taking, if you like, the plain vanilla, the more straightforward community news stories, which might be press releases, public notices, submitted copy, etc. And the journalists if you like, the core reporters can sort of breathe again and actually go back, certainly in a local news context, to what you might call sort of true journalism or higher impact journalism. And that's definitely having a benefit. However, some of our journalists, particularly our younger journalists, are actually not, dare I say it, not necessarily used to going out and about, because they've been stuck at their desks for the last few years, just pushing out at high volume, local news stories. So there is a bit of a training element that we have to visit about, particularly the younger journalists coming out of journalism college, to actually give them the confidence to go out and do face-to-face interviews. That might sound a little strange, but they have been stuck at their screens for so long, they've slightly lost the art of interviewing face-to-face. I mean, it's a real issue for us and something we grapple with.
And Emily, similarly on that sort of reinvestment point, because I think the point we make here is AI will bring us efficiency. It's a management decision as to how we choose to reinvest that, whether we just take the saving or reinvest it. I assume for you it's the same thing. It's about breadth. It's about the number of things that you can cover. It's about being able to keep people in, out on the streets.
Yeah, and so where we are bringing in efficiencies is in some backroom operations. So in some elements of, finance, tech, production, all those sorts of areas. And it means we can invest, for example, in more vertical video journalists, in becoming truly video first, those sorts of things. So there is an advantage there. And I think one of the things we're also looking at is, given our role, how do we support publishers? So as I mentioned, I don't think we're in any danger of being the bad actors, but we can come a cropper when there are fake press releases, fake experts, fake videos doing the rounds. So we've launched a kind of verified expert hub, where we've actually spoken to people on a video call. We've figured out who they are. They are a verified, bona fide expert. We've got clips of their voice and their images and stuff. So, and that's free for publishers to use, so that they can make sure that somebody is a genuine expert. So we're trying to sort of be helpful in other ways.
Just to go to the question of trust, Joe, I think if we've been sort of consultants in our time long enough to be able to turn up and you say, we have to measure what matters. Trust is one of the things that I always found publishers will talk about at great length. We all think it's extremely important. But if we really dig into the surface of most publishers and said, how do you measure that? The measures for financial return or cost management, return on investment are much, much better than the measures of trust within the organization. What do you see? How are people actually measuring trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's a really tricky area, and typically people have perhaps, surveys have measured it. The Reuters news report measures it, but actually publishers have typically measured it by proxy, I suppose, in terms of engagement or the level of reads you've had, that sort of thing. I think that we are starting to see, in our work, that people are thinking about different ways of measuring trust. So, for example, the quality of comments that you get and the level to which people engage with each other. There is clearly an emerging trend across society, really, where sort of vertical trust, I suppose, sort of trust from authorities, is being perhaps a little bit broken down through fragmentation of information and different news sources. And actually we see there's a little bit of a trend for horizontal trust. And so being able to, and that's sort of peer-to-peer trust, I suppose, and that's being brought about a lot by some of the apps like Uber and Airbnb, and that sort of sense of peer ratings to use a service. So we're seeing some of the publishers worldwide starting to think about how can they measure that? How can they also cautiously moderate that so that they're not, they're allowing the conversation, but they're making sure that verified and not inappropriate comments are being made.
Anyone other sort of measures of trust?
Well, it's really hard to measure, and it's one thing that I guess I always wrestle with is what value do people put on trust? I mean, what we know is every time you survey anyone in any way, shape or form, independent or not, local media is always way trusted, and then it sort of scales down. But that in itself, I guess, doesn't meet the problem that, is people's declared wishes of people, it's kind of like the fast food versus organic. Everyone knows kind of fast food is not great for you, and you should eat, organic food. The reality is obviously consumers don't necessarily follow that. And I guess the thing that we have to be careful with as an industry is that we don't blindly follow this idea that trust in itself will get us over the hump of where we need to be. But it is something I think, and I don't know whether you don't need to measure everything in life to know the value of it. I think we all know it's intrinsic to what we are. We could do nth degree to kind of measure it, but I think that's a false comfort. We've got to do it, withhold it, live by it. And by the way, of course, and I think it's important to note, humans are not, we're not fallible as an organisation, very clearly through our past history. Even today, we have over 2,000 journalists. They will make mistakes, right? Some serious, some not so serious. So I don't want to pretend that in some way humans are perfect and the AI machines are not, because we know that's true, which is why I come back to more accountability. I always talk about our value to our consumers will be that we are accountable. And if we make mistakes, we will pay the consequence. And that's all I think publishers ask with the platforms, is that you share that accountability, share that accountability on copyright, share that accountability on regulation, because at the moment it doesn't feel that we're in a level playing field. And I hope eventually that consumers will start to realise that as AI proliferates, and it's a sample size of one, I've certainly felt my own social feeds have become increasingly contained with entirely fake content that is there to, engage me, because it'll be a picture of something I'm interested in. It's only when you look at it, you realise that's not a real picture. Now, I believe eventually you'll get to a point where consumers will start to see that. But if you look at the comments, what you'll see on a fake picture is the first 49 comments will be, oh my goodness, what a picture, how emotional. It'll be the 50th comment which goes, people, this is fake. And so the consumers still have a long way to go to even understand what they're looking like. So, it's a bit of an uphill battle.
Henry?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult from a publisher perspective to measure trust on a week-by-week, month-on-month basis, unless you're continually serving the market, and that's probably got quite a lot of noise with it. I mean, from our perspective, a better proxy is simply to measure loyal visitors. We try and get our editors and our news brands focused on that. They get bonused on the number of loyal visitors, and we define a loyal visitor as a user who comes back to the site more than 15 times a month. So that's pretty loyal. And I think if they're not trusting the content over a period of time, they're not going to come back to the site. So in terms of trying to manage and monitor the KPIs in the business, it's very difficult to have a KPI around trust, but I would say loyal visitors is our best attempt to underpin that.
Just commissioning some research into this with Cardiff University, looking at how you build trust in content, and in this, kind of what is the recipe for doing that? Because if you look at the creator economy, which is arguably overtaking a number of news brands, it's a very human-to-human, one-to-one relationship. And so how do we learn from that and start to say, how do we build that into our own content or our customers' content?
You've taken us back to people then. So this is one of the big questions I think about. So between us, or you all here, you're managing thousands of people. You're essentially, as leaders in big publishing businesses, big publishing enterprises, you're kind of managing this big transformation. So it's really interesting to me, as leaders, how do you talk about, the kind of what AI is bringing, how do you talk about that as a positive for your workforce? And secondly, how do you talk about this balance of sort of, yes, it's going to bring efficiency, but it's also going to do that? What's your sort of, when you're walking the floors in the business, how are you talking about that? Let's go to you first, Henry.
I've been really surprised that we've got virtually no pushback from AI in the newsroom. And I think there's two things that have driven that. The first is that they can see that it helps them in their journalism. Going back to my earlier point, they can see that it frees them up to go back and do higher impact journalism and not stuck to be their desk, editing press releases or copy editing from press releases, etc. And so they see that as a positive. And also we've kept true to our word, if you like, that we haven't used this to cut jobs. Because I think, and that, you have to be careful of that. There's a lot of pressures on our business. But I think as soon as the newsrooms get a sense that we might be reducing headcount in the newsroom because of AI, then I think we're in a fragile place, because arguably there's a contract of trust there. But I have been really surprised that I've had literally no pushback at all, not from the union, not from anyone in the newsroom as well. I mean, I do think the way that we've tried to talk about it has helped, which is sort of obvious, which is you're going to need AI for your resume, for your CV, if you want to be a successful journalist over the next few decades. So we run quite a lot of training programs now, and we have a full-time AI trainer who works in the newsroom. And it's quite a broad set of training discussions and tools. But I do think the journalists feel that we're giving something to their careers so that when they leave us in 3 or 4 years' time, they're going to need to have a resume, I think, that says that I am proficient in AI tools and AI skills, and I use AI in my journalism. So I think that they're smart enough to recognise that. So hopefully that will continue.
That's true of all ages, right? That's not just a new entrance thing. It's true of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm allowed to say it, the older employees are probably a bit later to adopt some of the technologies. I think the younger generation is just more on it. But yeah, generally speaking, it's true. Yeah.
Emily?
So a number of things. I think one, there's some sort of proof points. So where we have deployed AI on things like archive retrieval and that sort of stuff, you can show how helpful it can be. But I think the main point is, I always talk about, I've started to talk about, is getting comfortable with paradox. So yes, on the one hand, we want you to use these tools, and on the other hand, we are not allowing you to do these following things.
Yeah.
And you can't sort of say, it's not binary use of AI. It's kind of discrete, selected, carefully controlled, measured. And I think that's something that we have to get comfortable with talking to our staff about. It's not a yes or no question. And there are many no's, just as there are many yeses. So I think that's it.
We're going to hold you to last, because I know you've got quite an interesting bit to talk about here. So Jo, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think there's always a tendency, isn't there, when new technology comes in for, particularly our finance colleagues, or, the sort of rush to the efficiencies that might be possible. And I know that is, partly the subject of the panel. But I think the opportunity is also driving engagement, driving growth. Sean just talked about new products and propositions, and you can do targeted newsletters much faster than you could before, which is a brilliant way of driving growth. There's lots of, the ability to, the FT ran a story around Ukrainian children being taken for adoption in Russia, which involved loads of different sources, lots of different data coming in, lots of unstructured data, and that sort of, the ability to break that story, research and break that story faster and deeper than you could before, I think is amazing for journalists in the newsroom. You can be faster and better, I think.
So Piers, you tell the NUJ you're going to be faster and better, and everything's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I'd echo Henry's point. I think on the floor, it's one of our central pillars is tech and AI in our new strategy. I think people genuinely enjoy trying new stuff. Our AI journey dates back to 2018, and that was me sitting down with IBM Watson. Then we created Mantis, and that sense of this sort of enjoyment about doing something new and making, and hopefully, in theory, finding a solution to a problem that we had. I think that still runs true through the organisation. But clearly, there is, for us as an organisation, we've had to restructure to focus on our new priorities. That has meant job losses. The shorthand narrative is because of AI, and that will be a stick that I will be beaten with, the company will be beaten with, that this, you've made it a central pillar to your business, therefore you're going to mean job losses. And the truth, the truth is nuanced in some extent. So I think it's wrong. I think it would be wrong to say that AI is not going to change any industry. Amazon have been very clear about the changes that it's going to make to their back office. Job profiles are going to change with AI. I think it would be disingenuous to say that it won't. But the idea that people fear AI, I don't think that's true at all. I think people see it as a way to focus on the more enjoyable things that they want to do, right? Rather than processing large sheets of Google data to try to find the one cell which is around yield optimization, you can do it way quicker with AI. And also for our journalists, we do put them under pressure for that productivity, but it might be less is more. We're using at the moment, or we're trialling at the moment, agentic AI to give content scores to understand where the value really lies. So is it 10 stories about subject A, or is it one story about subject B? Is the balance of engagement, revenue? So there's huge potential. But I think broadly people are, they get it, right? We all get it. Like, this is a wave coming towards us, and you can either stand in front of the wave and try to stop it, or you can roll with it. And I think I don't think there's anyone who says don't roll with it.
And that's your conversation internally, isn't it? Which is this is just part of the big program of transformation at Reach in general. This is one of the tools we're using, I suppose.
Yeah, and clearly though, if you want a binary discussion which is preserve the status quo, don't change, then of course AI is perceived as a threat, and it will be the shorthand for any organisation going through transformation, inside of media or out. It will be used as stick to beat you, that CEOs are replacing humans with AI. But as I said at the start, and I say to my teams all the time, is we do not have a purpose. We would be competing with an Indian bot farm in Gujarat if we are just about AI. That cannot be the Echo, it can't be the Daily Record. It is the people that shape that brand. But in headlines, it's going to be, in social media commentary, it's going to be AI kills jobs, and it's not true.
No. We'll ask you for one sort of more thing each, and then maybe we'll take some questions because we've got such a good panel. What are you most excited about? We should finish on a high, I think. So what are you kind of most excited about in terms of the possibilities of AI within your organisation? We'll start from you and come back this way.
I think it is doing more things quicker and breaking into new areas that, as a traditional, if you want to call it, publisher, we might have found it hard to do. So moving into video in a more aggressive phase than if I'd needed to hire 200 expensive video editors. So we have a chance to look, other people are disrupting our world, but we also have a chance to disrupt, or at least partially disrupt, other worlds. So I think that's probably what I get most excited about.
Joe, what are you seeing that excites you?
I think if you look globally, I briefly mentioned it earlier, but the opportunity, we live in a global world, people are moving all over the place, but the opportunity to stand up new products, particularly for the diaspora populations, I think is a tremendous growth opportunity.
I think being able to release products and services faster, definitely. We've just done a project on Alamy, our images business. We've got 420 million images. We actually never knew what most of them were. We'd only classified about 10 million. We've been able to classify all 420 million, and you can now search for them, semantically with natural language, and that's unbelievable. We thought that would take years and years and years and years. So that sort of thing is really exciting when it comes to content. I think there are some things which will come in the future which could be quite exciting. The whole kind of digital democracy idea, I think, could work really well, but we're a stage off that. But I think that could be really exciting on the sort of data journalism side. Yeah.
Reiterating what I've said, I'm really excited what AI can do, particularly in the newsroom. Yeah. And I do think that properly implemented, it will have a transformational positive impact on building a sustainable business for local news. We've increased the number of local stories we cover over the last 12 months, largely because of the AI tools, by 10%. So we now do 50,000 local stories a month. And that is then the bedrock to doing higher impact journalism. So I think specifically in the newsroom, I'm interested in it. I do think it could be what the industry needs. Yeah.
What a lovely way to finish. We've got time probably for 2 or 3 questions. Who has, I'm sort of saying that as if microphones are going to appear, and they seem to be appearing. Wonderful, thank you. Tracy.
Hi, Tracy DeGrusse, William Reed. Thank you. Really, really good and interesting panel. I wonder if trust is built by being familiar and by being known and consistent. And then I'm sort of wondering what role values within your organisation are, because your values are what define your people, your human values. So is there a role for values here? Defining who we are as humans in our businesses will be something that helps with trust.
For sure. We do a lot of work on that, about our purpose. We talk about we want to be where people live, and that's not just geographical, that's politically, we have left and right, all of that kind of stuff. But I think your first point of the question is the biggest obstacle is we have to be seen. And in a world where we're being disintermediated by the platforms, I can have all the values I want for the Echo or the Chronicle up in Newcastle. We're being destocked from the shelves, and that is a challenge. That is undoubtedly a challenge. So I think for sure you need to know who you are, but that in itself is not going to build enough trust. I think the big bang has happened, the universe has expanded, and there's a lot more dark matter in between all of us, right? And connecting those stars is becoming tougher and tougher.
Any additions to that?
Just to add, I suppose, I think the big challenge is that trust was perhaps a little bit of a given in a world where there were fewer information sources. So I think, the authenticity and transparency, actually, we've seen lots of examples recently of where humans also make mistakes in the media, but it is about, you're absolutely right, values, but authenticity and transparency, I think, is going to be important.
There's a cultural piece as well, we all talk about culture of the newsrooms, and, they are cultural beasts, and AI will change that culture in some good ways in terms of innovation, in terms of pace, in terms of curiosity, creativity. But at the same time, you don't want to lose the really positive aspects of that culture, which are about being pedantic on facts, which are about being ruthless, and which are about holding power to account and challenging and not shortcutting. And I think we're seeing that you want that culture, best bits of the culture, to be maintained. And I don't think anybody quite knows how to solve those two things at the moment.
I think I just add that I've worked in a lot of newsrooms where the whole newsroom assumed that everybody in Britain knew that they had very strong values and were very trustworthy, and therefore they never needed to say it. And it never appeared in the products. And we never talked about how much effort had gone into producing the stories or verifying them, or actually how many humans had worked on it, because one doesn't. It was, it was just sort of assumed. And I suspect that's going to be one of the changes over the next couple of years, is that people will make the newsroom much more visible, the human newsroom much more visible in the way that stories are presented, would be my guess.
That's a really good point.
A question. I'm going to go to the gentleman there, if I can, just so you get your steps in.
Thank you. Really engrossing discussion. Just sort of thinking about trust a bit more broadly. I'm Adrian Barrick from FT Specialist. Mm-hmm. And your reputation, which obviously is a sort of bedrock of trust, do you worry about how your brands and your content are being used on the LMMs themselves, what that means for the reputation that you're going to have with audiences? And is there anything you can do to control that? Are you blocking those LMMs, for example?
We try and control it, but it's a bit like whack-a-mole. So we try and block all the LLMs from scraping our content apart from Google, because we're concerned about how that might affect our search results. But yeah, I think it is a concern, and there's a big debate, maybe you're dealing with it later on the agenda, about obviously the LLMs and the platforms, raping and pillaging our journalist content and getting virtually nothing in return, and some publishers have signed licensing deals, etc. But yeah, no, it's a big concern, and it could disintermediate us.
Nothing really to add, more to add than Henry's point. I think that's a big question. Almost the reverse, the problem is that our brands aren't even being associated with those results. So in some extent, they're taking our content. There's not any attribution back to us. So in a way, I almost wish that there was a problem of our brands being seen on the LLMs, because the problem is the brands aren't being seen at all.
To be honest, if the headline is 3.5 car pile-up just outside Lewisham.
Yeah, exactly, right, 3.5 cars.
Last question.
Hi there, Tammy from The Guardian. Just picking up on Henry's point about what this is doing to the sort of skills of staff in our newsroom. You use the word human in the loop quite regularly, but how are you actually building humans into your loop? How are you keeping your staff engaged in a process where they might not be the sort of the initiators or the creators of it?
It's a big question. I think we're being successful in it. We spend a lot of time, as I said, training the journalists on the AI tools. Of the 800 journalists, we only have 35 who are trained in the AI tools. And if you don't want to use the AI tool, we don't force you to. So we respect that. But I don't fully understand the premise of the question, because we don't have, as I say, we have no issues with our human journalists embracing the AI technology. We respect if they don't want to use the AI technology, but most of them do and see the value of it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Could I get a large round of applause for our panel, Piers, Joe, Emily, Henry? Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening, and to all our speakers for taking to the stage to discuss AI, efficiency and integrity. We've got more events coming up in 2026, from the Monetising B2B Forum in May, which booking is now open for. Have a look at flashesanflames.com for more information, to plans for our summer newsletter and podcast focused gathering, and the return of the AI Forum next November. If you want to read our key takeaway articles or sign up to our newsletter, you can find both at voices.media. On next week's podcast, independent CEO Christian Broughton will be talking about what AI means to his organisation. Until then, goodbye.